Back when I was in high school, my English teacher, he was concerned that I was only reading Stephen King and I should probably broaden my horizons, and so he gave me two options: Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein, and then he gave me A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick. Time Out of Joint is now my 13th Philip K. Dick novel. I've read through quite a number of his books. He's not my most read author by any stretch of the imagination, but I've read a number of his books, and I've enjoyed most of them. Some of them were not so great, but he has put out some genuinely amazing fiction before. The biggest downfall with Philip K. Dick is always and consistently going to be his prose. His prose is extremely clunky. He might actually be the clunkiest author that I like, and I like Dean Koontz. Hollywood has made quite a number of movies out of this guy's films. Blade Runner, Minority Report, Total Recall, Scanner Darkly. Despite the fact that Hollywood seems to love this guy, almost nothing of his actually sold well while he was alive. Of course, he toiled in obscurity for almost his entire life. It's a common thing with a lot of writers. He died in the 80s, long before he really got the recognition that he probably did deserve. Time Out of Joint is an extremely short novel, but then again, so is almost every Philip K. Dick novel. The longest one that I know of that he put out was Gather Yourselves Together. I've not read Gather Yourselves Together yet. That's one of the more recent books of his that I picked up, not read it yet. Time Out of Joint itself is very average size for Philip K. Dick. It stands at 255 pages softback, and that is 680,000 words approximately. I was able to blow through this in, I think it was a day, maybe 2 days, near the beginning of this year. It was an amazingly quick read. The plot of Time Out of Joint is definitely obscure and weird, just like most Philip K. Dick plots are, but it's the good kind of weird, I think. Regal Gum lives in 1959 and earns his living through unconventional income. He is the unbeaten champion of a local newspaper contest in picturesque small-town America. A series of odd occurrences unfold, leaving Regal Gum unnerved and paranoid, believing that there is something wrong beneath the surface of the town he knows as home. As he hunts for the truth, however, he discovers that the mysterious conspiracy goes far deeper than he could have imagined. There's no telling what's real and what's been fabricated. As I was reading this book, I had this feeling that I've read this before, I've seen this, I know what this is, and of course I hadn't. This was the first and only time that I've read Time Out of Joint. However, it occurred to me about halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through, that I'm pretty much just reading The Truman Show. Now, granted, this came long before The Truman Show. I mean, like decades before The Truman Show came out. The similarities are, of course, fairly striking. I myself am not the first person to point out the similarities between Time Out of Joint and The Truman Show, but it's almost glaringly obvious. The end of the book was satisfactory for me. I've seen a bunch of other people bash on the end because it does become a bit of a talk fest. However, I did think that it was perfectly fine. If this was a movie, then it would be a problem if it was all just a bunch of talking at the end. However, the narrative of a novel, I think, is just a bit different. You can get away with just having talking in at the end of the book. You don't have to, per se, have a bunch of action going on. You can have an emotional climax at the end of the book, as opposed to a physical climax, an action-packed climax. The twist at the end of the book, of course, spoilers, there's a war between America and the lunatics on the moon, the lunar colonists on the moon. And essentially, Regal Gum has been helping America in the war against the lunatics, against his will. He's actually aligned with the interests, the beliefs, and the politics of the lunatics. However, due to X, Y, and Z reasons, he's been more or less brainwashed into working for the United States government, unwittingly, unknowingly working for them. So that's a bit heartbreaking to think that you could be turned against your own cause and turned against your own beliefs and ideals. I thought it was rather effective. It ties into the themes of distrust and paranoia and forces beyond our control that Philip K. Dick often writes about. Philip K. Dick, I want to reiterate this, is not the best prose writer. If he was better at writing prose, I do think that the end would have tied together stronger. Whereas it worked for me, I can certainly understand why it would rub other people the wrong way. Philip K. Dick is very abrasive with his writing. His writing is extremely clunky, and I'm alright getting around that. I always try to give the stories the benefit of the doubt. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief twice as far as any story asks me to, as long as that story is entertaining to me in any way, shape, or form. The plot of Time Out of Joint itself is pretty freaking absurd. However, I'm willing to be okay with the absurdity of this plot, with the absurdity of almost every single Philip K. Dick plot. I'm okay suspending my disbelief to get there. But I can understand that a lot of other people, might need a little more massaging. They might require a little bit more to get to that point. And that's okay. Different strokes for different folks. The characters in Philip K. Dick's books are almost always, they're all very samey to me. Any of his characters, to me, feel like they could be replaced with just about anybody. I do think it would have, of course, benefited Philip K. Dick if his characters could have been a little bit more individual themselves, if they could have stood out more on their own. For instance, Rick Deckard in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. He was kind of a bland character. The only reason we followed him is because we need to follow a Blade Runner in that story. It didn't really matter who the hell that person was. They just needed to do that job. And the same thing with Rhaegal Gum in this book. It doesn't really matter who Rhaegal Gum is. He could have been written as any character, and it wouldn't affect just about anything. You don't read a Philip K. Dick book for the characters specifically. You read a Philip K. Dick book for the weird shit that's going to happen and the themes that he puts into his books. As I said before, this book was extremely absurd. I generally enjoy absurdism. I like it when stories and plots and things go high and over the top. Damned by Chuck Palahniuk. There is an over-the-top, ridiculous book. It's quite absurd. I loved Damned even more because of how weird it is. Ilium and Olympus. Those things were freaking weird. And I loved it. I loved Ilium and Olympus because they were weird. Drawing of the Three in the Dark Tower is one of the more notable standout stories in that series because it's one of the weirdest ones in that series. And that's saying something because there's some weird shit that goes on in the Dark Tower. I just generally enjoy when things get weird. In this book, Time Out of Joint certainly got weird. It gave us lots of just really absurd moments. The entire just concept of the war with lunar colonists is just, okay, alright, I'm there for it, why the fuck not? The soda stand just up and blooping away, that was, nice and weird. It piqued my curiosity. Granted, that didn't really ever get addressed at the end of the book. That never really mentioned why. I think that's supposed to just imply that the entirety of Rhaegal Gum's reality is completely unreal, and that we're probably not supposed to take anything in this book to be actual factual reality. Regardless, it did help the book feel weird, and I really like that. One of its best benefits is the fact that it moves at breakneck pace. Almost every Philip K. Dick book just really does keep moving. Philip K. Dick never stops. He's always moving on to the next thing. He never stops to smell the roses with stuff. He just keeps going. And that's the nice thing about Philip K. Dick. I read this book, as I said earlier, I think I read this in about a day, maybe 2 days maximum. Philip K. Dick, he's always short, sweet, and to the point. The biggest problems with the book are the exact ones that I've mentioned already. It was really clunky in the prose, and the end, depending on who you are, you may or may not like the end. I was fine with it, but it's also rubbed a number of people the wrong way. It's far from Philip K. Dick's best story that he's written, but it is certainly pretty decent. The only other thing I can really count against it is that Time Out of Joint has kind of a crappy title compared to the rest of Philip K. Dick's body of work. Compare that to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, The Transmigration of Timothy Arctur, A Scanner Darkly. Philip K. Dick has had some of the coolest titles in the history of science fiction. Time Out of Joint is, unfortunately, just a good title, not amazingly superb, best of the lot kind of a thing. That's a very nitpicky thing to say, but again, when you have the best titles in the entirety of the genre, I think you're fine. Time Out of Joint was really good. It was really, really good. I'm gonna have to rate it with a B. If Philip K. Dick's writing was stronger and if the end was a little more kinetic, I think I could have rated it higher. I did say that the end was fine for me, and it was. But I do think that the ending could have been better. It could have been more kinetic, more impactful. I remember much more of the first third and the middle third of the book than the end third. It was alright by the end. And so, altogether, I have to give it a B. Compared to the rest of Philip K. Dick's work that I have read, it's fairly underrated. I really do think that it goes near the top. It should be heralded with Scanner Darkly, with Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, which is probably my favorite book that he's written. Am I going to reread this book? Yeah, probably. I imagine that I will. There are going to be other Philip K. Dick books that I'm going to read first. I'm going to reread other Philip K. Dick before I get to this one. However, yeah, I'm pretty certain that I am going to read time out of joint at least once more. Another book that I plan to reread is The Circus, an American Fantasy, which is one that I wrote. Surprise, I'm gonna sell you shit. This is my debut novel, The Circus, an American Fantasy. Penny Robinson finds herself trapped in an enormous otherworldly circus where capitalism is king, crime runs rampant, and souls are currency. The only chance for survival is to abandon morality and bend to the whims of the circus dictator, or risk her life and break the system she's become trapped in. The Circus, an American Fantasy is available for sale online, and the first chapter is available for free on YouTube. I also have Portraits in Bloodlines. Inside are 23 short stories of the horror, slipstream, science fiction, and other genres. A little bit of everything for everyone in Portraits in Bloodlines. I'm also going to be at the Artist Assemble Horror Fest in Mesa, Arizona from October 11th to the 13th. If you're curious about the movie collection I have behind me, go over to my wife's channel. She's currently going through all of our DVDs, our Blu-rays, and documenting the process of our collection. Thanks for watching. And also, just for the record, I love the name Regal Gum. It's just so out of left field. I love the name Regal Gum. I don't know. As a guy that has a slightly weird name myself, I approve.